So what you're saying to me makes a lot of sense with respect to a sort of rank and file Republican voter. It's sort of the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Some people will pick the devil you don't. Some people are just habituated to voting a certain way. Some people have years-long distaste for Hillary Clinton. Some people were particularly upset about, her email practices, her foundation practices, which garnered a lot of attention during the campaign. But somebody like Paul Ryan, he gets intelligence briefings. He understands the similarities between Trump's style of politics and somebody like Vladimir Putin's. At that level where you've worked your whole life because you have a suite of ideas you want to enact, does your value system kind of get like cocked onto its side a little bit, where you decide that if I can fuse Trump's authoritarianism with my policy agenda, maybe that's not ideal, but it's better than 4 more years of Obama-style centrist liberalism? Why? I was, when Ted Cruz gave that speech at the convention where he said, vote your conscience, I thought that's an opening for maybe not the Speaker of the House, but for a suite of principled conservatives to say, okay, this is not our party.
Yeah.
But then obviously, like over the course of the next several weeks, that opening closed. And I wonder why at that level of politics, there wasn't more of a, why weren't there more McMullins?
Well, one of the things you said early on there was that they get the briefings. These leaders, not the rank and file
Right.
Republican voters, but the leaders get the intelligence briefing. So they must have known the threat that Donald Trump posed to the country. But I actually don't think that's true. I think most elected Republican leaders still did not fully understand it. They understood that Donald Trump did not reflect their values. They understood that he would likely be extremely corrupt, I think. Some of them understood well the threat that he posed, truly understood. Those with military experience, those that were maybe privy to more intelligence. Not everybody in the House of Representatives has the same level of access to intelligence. But even, and that should have been enough, I'll tell you. There were discussions about, for example, RT America, which is the Russian cable channel in the United States that is essentially, pro-Trump propaganda and promotes stories that undermine Americans' confidence in democracy and in our democratic institutions. So there were those kinds of activities. There were also, discussions about Donald Trump's relationship to Vladimir Putin and the nature of it and how troubling it was, and some very serious assessments about what that meant. And that should have been enough. Let me make that clear.
Right.
And in fact, it's very disappointing that it wasn't. But I still think even in that, a lot of our elected leaders did not fully understand, and still do not, what a danger he presents to the country. And, people who have lived abroad under authoritarian regimes like I have, we know what it looks like. And so it's not new to us. We can identify it for what it is very quickly. Or if you're a student of history, then you can do that too. But if you don't have either one of those two experiences, learning experiences, it is very difficult to identify. Now, with all of that said, yes, I do think clearly, and I've said it over and over again, that a lot of Republicans put party over country, put power over principle. They did it in a number of ways. I do think, in not all of them, there are some who distinctly did not. I wish they would have been more vocal. I think they should have been more vocal. I think we need leaders who would have stood up and been more forceful about it. But in general, we have a problem in our country, and it's exposed on the right, in that we have too many leaders who are willing to sacrifice the country's interests in order to protect their own seats, in this case in Congress.
Right. I mean, what's up? Is it just because, President Obama, I don't know if he ever called Trump an authoritarian during the campaign, but he basically said this guy, like, democracy is on the ballot, was one of his stump speech lines. He made it, I think, as plain as possible that this was not so much Republicans versus Democrats, liberals versus conservatives, but small d Democrats versus anti-democratic forces. Right. And I kind of struggle to remember exact quotes from people like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush during the primary, but, amoral, unfit to be president, possibly even strongman, like very, very severe criticisms of him as being temperamentally different
Right.
from a more standard issue Republican. If you're serving in Congress as this is all going on, do you just think of that bipartisan criticism of Trump from Obama to Jeb Bush as just campaign trail histrionics, or why was it not a bigger deal, do you think, to Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell that members of their own conferences were saying, this guy's a danger, he shouldn't have nuclear weapons, he doesn't understand democracy?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a source of my disappointment. I mean, you had some of Trump's primary contenders saying that he was a con man, that he was a danger to the country, this sort of thing, the things that you mentioned. But then they came around and supported Donald Trump, and I think that very metamorphosis demonstrates a lack of principle for a lot of our leaders, is what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. And you can't say those things. I assume that they meant them. I believe that they meant them because they were accurate after all. But then to be able to set those things aside and ultimately support Donald Trump is indeed troubling and reflects very poorly on those leaders' commitment to our country and commitment to the principles that underpin democracy and basic liberties and equality in America. So, it's truly troubling to me, and it is what it is, and that's why I've been calling for a new era of civic engagement in this country, where we proactively identify people who will be honest and wise leaders and promote them into office. So not merely passively seeing who decides to run and who the parties put up for us to vote for, but actually go out and identify our friends, our colleagues, our neighbors who would make good leaders, who we would make good leaders, and convince them to run, find support for them, and promote them into office. This is the sort of thing we need to do. This is about self-governance, after all, and we can no longer be passive about it. We simply can no longer afford to sit back and be passive participants in this process.